All right, let's get started. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Jackson, Chairman of YMWREA for 2020, and welcome to our first virtual YMWREA Luncheon. Please take your seats on your couches so we can get started. On behalf of the board of YMWREA, we hope you're all safe and healthy at home during this COVID pandemic. Our thoughts go out to you and your loved ones to help you through this time, and we look forward to a time we can get together again at the University Club for our traditional Tuesday lunches and our many social and charitable events. For those that may not have been thrilled with the food or dress code previously, I hope this luncheon finds you at home in sweatpants with a meticulously cooked lunch. To begin our luncheon, I'd like to call upon Jimmy Kuhn, our chairman in 1985, to give today's invocation. Please welcome Jimmy.
Hi, everyone. You know, I'm old enough to remember when President Ford told New York City to drop dead. And Lou Rudin, one of our great icons of the real estate industry, banded together all of the New Yorkers and pulled us out of that crisis. I remember the savings and loan crisis, the recession in 2000, Hurricane Sandy, and the horrific attack on the World Trade Centers where we lost over 3,000 people. But this is different. This came out of nowhere, and we've now lost over 7,000 New Yorkers. So I thought I would dedicate this to all the New Yorkers who stand up for our city every day, for the healthcare workers that put their life on the line, and the first responders. I actually asked Billy Joel to show up, but he couldn't make it, so he'll have to do it with me.
Some folks like to get away, take a holiday in the neighborhood. Have a flight to Miami Beach or tomorrow. I'm taking the Greyhound on the Luncheon River line. I'm in New York, state of mind. Seeing all the movie stars in their fancy cars, in limousine, in high in the Rockies, up the Evergreen. I know what I needed. I don't want to waste more time. In New York, state of mind. It was so easy being day by day at touch with the rhythm you. And now I need it, give and take. Your times, daily news. Comes down to reality, and it's fine with me, cause I let it slide. Don't care if it's Chinatown or Riverside. I don't have no reasons, I left it all behind. And in New York, state of mind. I'm taking Greyhound on the Hudson River line. in New York. I'm in New York. I'm in New York, state of mind.
I love New York.
Yes.
That was awesome, Jimmy. Thank you. All right. So now we would like to recognize the former chairman in attendance today. So please rise when your name is called, then sit back down on your couch and imagine a stadium full of applause. Earl Altman, Jimmy Kuhn, Dennis Carr, Andrew Roos, Leslie Harwood, Nikki Hurriet, Caleb Coppell, Brian Waterman, Greg Shanker, David Browse, Bill Montana, Rob Fink, David Burke, Ron LaRusso, Lindsay Ornstein, Camille McGrady, and Lenny Lazzarino. So now we'd like to make a few announcements before our speakers. We've successfully been collecting membership dues, so thanks to all that have paid already. If you have not done so, you can arrange payment on the website or contact Forest Moss with any questions. Starting later this week, we're going to be hosting a small group members-only quarantine Zoom meetings. So I'll email information and calendar invites after this webinar later today. Lauren would like me to remind everyone interested in membership that applications are due on Friday, May 15th, no later than 5 p.m. And lastly, the YMWREA Foundation, Greg Shanker, and a team of producers has organized a web-based Zoom-enabled real estate cares event for frontline healthcare workers from Mount Sinai Hospital to be aired on Tuesday, April 21st at 6:30 p.m. The event will raise funds for nurses and other frontline workers through small donations starting at $25. The YMWREA Foundation is a co-sponsor along with the Real Estate Council of Carnegie Hall. The YMWREA Foundation will be making a donation which has been funded by one of our members specifically for this purpose. Others wishing to make substantial gifts can do so through the YMWREA Foundation as well. One of the former chairmen has already expressed an interest and is waiting to receive information on donations. The talent lineup for the event includes Joshua Bell and Larissa Martinez, Jimmy Buffett, and others. In case you're not familiar with Joshua Bell, he sells out Carnegie Hall every time he plays. And for this event, the newly created content will feature Joshua playing violin while his wife, the soprano Larissa Martinez, sings. I think everyone knows Jimmy Buffett, one of America's favorite artists. Greg has advised that Jimmy Buffett's been working in his studio this week creating personalized content just for this event. The concert format will be new for many viewers as it's web-based and Zoom-enabled to observe social distancing and keep safe. Congratulations to Greg and the YMWREA team for organizing this event and serving the long-standing tradition of YMWREA as giving back to the community. Some of you know that my sister is a nurse on the front line of COVID for COVID patients here in New Jersey, so I can personally attest that it's urgent for additional supplies and funding for those on the front line. The invitation will be mailed to all members later this week, and I'm asking you please to share the invitation with friends in the real estate industry and on social media. Entry-level pricing is expected to start at a $25 donation, which is enough to purchase an N95 mask, a protective suit, cap, and gloves for a healthcare worker on the front line. The event will show support for the New York City community, the real estate community, for our frontline healthcare workers, risking their personal safety and the safety of their families in order to help others during this unprecedented crisis. So do what you can to share the information to help make it a great event. And now, without further ado, let's get to our speakers. If you have specific questions, you can enter them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer them as many as possible at the end of the presentation. So please silence your pets and children, and let's get started. Today's guest speakers are from REBNY, Reggie Thomas and Ryan Monell. Reggie Thomas is a senior vice president at REBNY, overseeing government affairs and advocacy across city, state, and federal levels of government. He works closely with REBNY's divisions to analyze legislation, testify on behalf of the industry at public hearings, and develop advocacy campaigns on key issues. Ryan Monell joined REBNY as the Director for City Legislative Affairs on January 6th. Formerly, he served as Chief of Staff and worked to facilitate special initiatives and strategic objectives for Gilbane Building Company in the New York Division. He's also a graduate of The Ohio State University. Go Bucks. Please join me in welcoming Reggie and Ryan.
All right, go Bucks. Oh, geez. OHIO. Oh, no. Had I known about this beforehand, I may have reconsidered the webinar, but really great seeing everybody. And, thanks to Jimmy for that. I think that should be the opening for pretty much every luncheon that you guys do. So that was much needed right
Thank you,
now.
Jimmy.
So definitely want to thank you all for kind of hosting us. Obviously, this is an interesting time to say the least, but, we're all adapting accordingly. And, Ryan and I were in touch with many of you over the past week or so, and we're glad to hear that many of you are doing well. I know that some of you are obviously going through sort of the struggles right now of all this, but obviously on behalf of everyone at REBNY, we wish you all nothing but the best. So this is an interesting time to kind of be doing a webinar, talk about sort of everything that's going on, especially as it relates to the stimulus plan, because it seems like every couple of days are sort of
Uh-oh. Looks like Reggie froze here real quick.
session sometime in the next week, 10 days to potentially do another round of stimulus-related legislation and COVID-related legislation. So we'll make sure to keep everyone up.
Oh, so I think he froze out here quickly, so I'll go ahead and take over for Reggie. So apologize for that, but I believe what he was saying is essentially, we're working very diligently for REBNY to basically try to get as much information out and advocate for the needs of the real estate industry as we're facing this pandemic. I think a lot of folks have seen some of our our email blasts, as well as. Oh, there he is.
No, it's okay. You
Reggie, are you all right?
Sorry about that, everybody. It's always fun when you have technical difficulties in the middle of a webinar. Ryan, where did you leave off?
I just said, we're trying to advocate on behalf of the industry, and just wanted to say that, we're trying to understand everything that is happening in Washington and in Albany and disseminate it to the best of our abilities to get information out to where folks can see relief.
Yep, well said. And so before I kind of turn over to Ryan to really go through some of the more details of the stimulus, just wanted to talk about sort of what we as an industry are doing and we as a trade organization are doing. And we kind of look at it from a couple of different lenses. Is one, how can we advocate for rank and file members of the real estate industry, especially because you all have different sort of types of employment, you guys have different circumstances. The second thing is, what can we do to advocate for the industry as a whole? Obviously, this pandemic is causing quite a lot of problems in sort of day-to-day operations, your abilities to get deals done, your need to get clarity from government. But third, and really just as importantly, it's what are we doing to advocate for the state? Because right now, New York State is going through quite a lot of turmoil. I mean, we can expect significant tax revenue fallouts. We see a major disruption in sort of our day-to-day operations. And so what are the things we can do to advocate for the state and for the city? So as an example, in terms of advocacy for the state and the city, REBNY played a behind-the-scenes role in making sure that we got additional federal stimulus funding for the MTA. Right now, actually, we're working together with the Real Estate Roundtable and a number of other organizations to make sure that we can advocate for the industry on things like commercial mortgage forbearance or expanded unemployment insurance. One of the other key things that I think we really worked hard on, and Ryan, I feel like, has been sort of a REBNY's employment counselor, but for many of you, you're independent contractors, right? And so you're not necessarily going to be going through the traditional unemployment channels to make sure you can have enough revenue to tide you over during this time. And so REBNY played a large role in making sure that we advocated for an expanded pandemic fund. So for those who wouldn't normally be eligible for unemployment insurance, still have the ability to receive some assistance during this time. And so that's sort of what we see as our role, to help us weather the storm, but to continue to advocate for policies that we know can be helpful for everyone in New York, regardless if you're in the real estate industry or not. One of the things I did want to go over a little bit before I kind of turn over to Ryan to go through the stimulus packages, hopefully everyone is looking at Governor Cuomo's press conferences. I mean, I have family in California that is looking at it every day, but in the first couple of weeks, there was a lot of uncertainty about what, for example, was essential business and what wasn't essential business, whether or not you needed to come into the office or you need to come into the office. And so that's one of the things that we always look to in the press conference to get latest updates on that. And as we got in new information, we've always made sure to disseminate it to you all as widely as possible. I think one of the more recent parts of confusion is whether or not real estate is considered essential business or essential services. And so I wanted to just kind of nip that in the bud and talk a little bit about that to give you all clarity. So there was an announcement, and it wasn't put forward by the governor, that real estate is considered to be an essential service. However, the big however is, unlike, let's say, grocery store workers or pharmacists or liquor stores, where they have to operate in person, it was really clear that you should still be doing things remotely. Because as you all know from being in the industry, I mean, real estate is such a critical engine to the New York City and New York State economy. And so the governor and the Empire State Development Corporation still wanted to make clear that you all should continue to operate the best you can, but to a large extent, that absolutely has to be done remotely. So I'm glad we can kind of clarify sort of that confusion, if you will. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn over to Ryan, who's going to sort of begin to unpack sort of the top level lines of the federal stimulus package. In it, obviously, there was a number of things that went to individuals, including direct financial assistance, but also there were a lot of things that went to help businesses of all different sizes, some of which are things for under 500 employees, and some other things are for initiatives that will be unpackaged over the next week or two by the Treasury Department for those businesses that are over 500 employees. So I'll turn over to Ryan now.
All right. Well, thanks, Reggie. And I think in regards to the stimulus package, obviously there's a lot of information out there. I think a lot of folks that I've spoken to, just with it being a $2 trillion investment from the federal government to try to provide relief to as many people as possible. One of the things that we're trying to do is answer the questions in regards to our members at REBNY and to the industry in regards to how does it affect us, right? So what are the things there that are available in regards to relief for individuals or in particular independent contractors? And additionally, what are available for our clients? What are available for commercial tenants, small businesses that we work with every day, et cetera, that we know that we can help provide information and clarity on to make sure that folks who are really in need of help receive that help. So, REBNY's been working pretty diligently. We have a number of different facets of, as Reggie mentioned, available to try to help folks who may have questions or who may need clarity in regards to, what is exactly available and how to receive that help. So some of you might have spoken to our brokerage team. We have a number of folks available every day who are helping with unemployment, for example. But Reggie and I and some of our other colleagues really are here to help provide clarity and to help provide guidance in regards to what is available and particularly what it means, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go through some of the aspects of the CARES Act, also known as the stimulus package, and how it really pertains to us. So, as most folks probably know by now, here about 3 weeks ago, Congress passed and the president signed what is known as the CARES Act, which was a response to COVID-19 and how to provide relief to individuals. So again, this was $2 trillion that was set aside for relief efforts. And predominantly for this round of stimulus, this is actually the third round of stimulus that there's been, it was really in support of workers, support for residential owners and residents, lending support for businesses through SBA small loans, and then tax support. Not to mention also, there was a number of federal dollars set aside for state and local governments. You'll probably hear Governor Cuomo say more needs to be done. I think there's agreement through a lot of the folks who are in our industry as well, who believe that it's very important to support state and local governments through additional stimulus. Obviously it's very important to ensure that we continue to see the necessary resources and necessary government support services continue. So we want to make sure we continue to advocate for that as well. But in regards to what I said earlier, how does this really affect us as individuals? How does it affect individual agents and brokers And there's really two aspects of that that are particularly important. So the two main facets are the extension and expansion of unemployment insurance to include independent contractors and those who are self-employed in the Paycheck Protection Program, which you've probably heard a lot about here in the last couple of days in particular, as starting on Friday, this past Friday, April 10th, independent contractors were actually able to start applying for these loans through individual banks across the city and across the country. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit first about unemployment and how the federal government expanded through the stimulus unemployment to include independent contractors through a program called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. So as I mentioned, it's been greatly expanded and important to many in our industry. Independent contractors are now eligible for benefits under what is called PUA, as I mentioned. And REBNY has been helping as many agents as possible who are categorized as independent contractors to apply for unemployment if they've seen a loss of wages. There are also some other important changes to unemployment as well, including the amount you will receive per week and as well as how long you can receive benefits. So to elaborate on that a little bit, the way unemployment works is that the amount you receive is based off your average wages over your highest paid quarter from the previous year, and that is then placed into a formula to receive a weekly benefit. So in New York, the maximum amount you can receive a week currently is $504. However, the federal government, through the stimulus, passed a provision stating that everyone on unemployment will receive an additional $600 a week, meaning that the maximum you can receive in New York a week would be $1,104. So that on average is actually the typical weekly income for an average New Yorker, which fortunately means that for many, they will see no loss in wages for the period that they're on unemployment if they receive unemployment. So for those on unemployment, you will continue to see that additional $600 through July 31st of this year. And as I mentioned, the stimulus bill also expanded the maximum number of weeks you can receive unemployment insurance from 26 to 39. Now, in addition to unemployment changes, the bill also set aside money that will be sent directly to individuals, regardless of if you've lost your job or lost wages or not. So you might have heard of these checks will be sent directly to individuals. If you make $75,000 less, you will receive a one-time check of $1,200. And for those who make between $75,000 and $99,000, that $1,200 is prorated depending on your income. That's also if you file jointly, for example, as a married couple. Those who make double that $75,000 of $150,000 or less will receive $2,400. And then for each child, if you fall into this category, you will receive an additional $500. So hopefully those one-time checks will also help offset expenses as folks help to wade or are working to wade through this crisis. So
Ryan,
that's actually separate from unemployment.
Ryan, just wanted to just really quickly interject on the unemployment part, because one of the things we've been doing, especially Ryan, is we are getting quite a lot of messages from members of the industry about things like, hey, I can't get through to the website, or why in the world that once I apply, I have to call 400 times to maybe get somebody to do a confirmation. And that's a big thing why, we really appreciate all the ongoing feedback and communications to us to make sure we can advocate for the industry. And so after quite a lot of advocacy with the governor's office, that requirement of sort of a confirmation call has kind of been waived. They've upgraded their servers and their systems to try to handle sort of the influx. So this is one of those times where, we really appreciate the industry letting us know about their day-to-day interactions with sort of a state agency and us being able to help troubleshoot that.
Yeah, and so, we've received a lot of feedback in regards to the system being very difficult to navigate. And again, REBNY set up a COVID-19 resource guide on our website. There is a lot of information in regards to if you are looking to apply for unemployment insurance and are an independent contractor in particular, how to do that. The process has changed. So Reggie's went a little bit over the last couple of days, and we're working to really help navigate that system. Obviously, everyone's a little bit different in regards to how you made a commission or how you're categorized as an independent contractor, et cetera. And you know, we're trying to help folks navigate those questions and those issues as best as possible. Fortunately, to Reggie's point as well, Google kind of stepped in and helped update the DOL system, the Department of Labor system, which is how you receive your benefit and how you apply through New York. And the interface is actually a lot better from what we understand than it was a couple of days ago. You also no longer have to wait online for hours on end. That was the process here last week. They've made it to where a representative from the Department of Labor will call you. So there are these new changes that have been put into place to help folks receive unemployment. So, you know, if you're deterred or been frustrated with the system, obviously, you know, if you are eligible for unemployment, we encourage you to take advantage of that relief, and REBNY is here to help you navigate that process. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can help in any way. We'll take some questions on it at the end, but I do want to kind of go forth and talk a little bit about the other big aspect of stimulus that can help individual independent contractors, and that is a paycheck protection program. So a lot of folks have probably heard about this program. It is a little convoluted. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but for most small businesses, for most independent contractors, it's probably the biggest aspect in regards to relief that you can receive through the federal government, through the stimulus, that can be utilized to offset expenses, including your own payroll, including your own paycheck, if you need be through the period of the pandemic. So the Paycheck Protection Program, as I mentioned, is a Small Business Administration loan program that authorized $349 billion in forgivable loans to small businesses, including independent contractors, to help pay not only employees but yourself, and to help offset other overhead expenses that you may incur through the pandemic. As I mentioned, this is actually a forgivable loan program. So what that means is, you know, obviously it's a loan, but basically becomes a forgivable grant if you do a number of things after receiving your money. So first and foremost, you need to utilize the amount you receive within 8 weeks of receiving it. So obviously we want to see these loans utilized to help re-stimulate the economy, help offset, you know, any loss of income or revenue that you've received, to help businesses continue, and in particular help folks keep their employees, if you have employees on payroll. So first and foremost, for the loan to be forgiven, you have to keep, you have to spend the money within 8 weeks of receiving it. Secondly, and this is something that REBNY has some concerns with, but as it stands right now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, but as it stands right now, if you do receive a loan and you want it to be forgiven, you have to utilize at least 75% to offset payroll costs. So that means that 75% of the loan would have to be utilized to pay your employees or pay yourself, or pay costs that are associated with your employees, like insurance premiums, etc., to see that loan forgiven. And then thirdly, and this is more relevant to small businesses who have employees, you have to rehire folks you might have furloughed or laid off to restore your payroll to pre-pandemic levels by June 30th of this year. And that's a date, of course, that might be in flux depending on where we are here in a couple of months. But as it stands right now, those are the three facets that ensure that you would receive forgiveness on your loan. So you meet those three criteria and the loan will be forgiven. In regards to how the loan is calculated, it is based off of 2.5 times of your average payroll costs. So for small businesses, you know, that is payroll, that can be a number of different things. But for independent contractors, it's a little bit different. You know, you want to utilize, you know, the income that was reported either on your Schedule C or your 1099 to determine your salary and loan amount. And this is actually utilized by calculating net salary. So income after expenses is what you would utilize to calculate your loan amount, and you multiply that by 2.5 times to receive your maximum loan. So again, you know, while it's based off of your payroll, these funds can be utilized for mortgages, for rent, for utilities, for independent contractors, you know, any other costs to offset business expenses that you would otherwise be paying for through commission or wages that you're not receiving right now. And again, that can all be forgivable if you meet the criteria I discussed earlier. The way that you apply for this is through individual banks. So, you know, a lot of the small business administration loans you apply through directly to the SBA. For the Paycheck Protection Program, as many of you might have found already, you know, you apply through individual banks. So there's the vast majority of banks here in the tri-state area I have found are participating in this. Many of them have their own criteria. Unfortunately, there are some requirements that some banks are putting into effect that might not allow for certain individuals to take advantage of applying through the Paycheck Protection Program through that particular bank. Specifically, you know, Chase, I know, for example, in Bank of America, have a requirement that you had to have had a small business checking account or business checking account established through the bank by, I think it was February of this year. So folks are finding that out and not being able to apply for loans. REBNY is working very diligently to try to find what banks are actually not requiring certain aspects, such as having a business checking account by a certain date, et cetera, to make sure we can provide that information and provide those opportunities to more independent contractors in particular, because we know a lot of folks might not have a business checking account set up for their S Corp, or you know, might not have had something set up through the bank if they wanted to initially take a loan out through. So you know, there are some aspects that you got to pay attention to, but by and large, a lot of lenders are taking advantage of the program. And, you know, we certainly encourage you, if you have an S Corp established, you know, do categorize as an independent contractor to, you know, take advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program, because we find that to be probably the most logical and probably the biggest source of relief that will be coming down the pipe from the federal government through any of the stimulus throughout the pandemic. So this is a program that is designed to help as many people as possible. Is designed to help pay for paychecks and payrolls, and you know, REBNY, again, just like we are for unemployment, is here to help disseminate that information. We are actually in the process of setting up a webinar through REBNY for next week, and we'll be sending out more information. But this webinar will be based off of how to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program if you are an independent contractor, and more specifics in regards to what the criteria and what the requirements are for the program, and how to basically ensure that you receive forgiveness on that loan if you do apply. So that's some more information that will be coming down the road here through our website and our email blasts in the next couple of days. But we certainly encourage individuals who are looking to take advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program to join that webinar and learn more information from folks who have been working with the SBA to get that information to us. So,
you know, just to that point about Ryan, Ryan made about sort of following up with REBNY on this, because, you know, listen, Ryan and I have been involved in government for quite some time, one way or the other, directly in or outside, and these are messy programs. I mean, normally the government trying to say, hey, we want to give away $300 billion and to try to do it themselves, not going to happen in just a week. And it was kind of amazing how they announced the program, and literally 7 days later was when people were supposed to start actually lending this money out. And so SBA, there was no way they could have done this themselves. And so you have a lot of banks who have their own different circumstances. You have a lot of Chase employees who are working remotely. You have a lot of bank branches that are closed. So, you know, you have a major behemoth, let's say like Chase, who's had to make a business decision to say, you know what, as long as you had a checking account with us for 30 days, we can go ahead and process this because we have the account information ready. And then you have some smaller, let's say, community banks who are saying, you know what, maybe we will have these sort of open branch hours for you to come in, open up an account, and allow to kind of go through that process. So these things are generally very messy. I don't think for the rest of my life I'll ever see the federal government say, hey, we want to give away hundreds of billions of dollars in under a week. So as we go through this process, government, trust me, government is as messy as you think it is. And so, the only way things get better, and we've seen this all the time with even your own advocacy, the only way we can improve things is if you communicate that things need to get improved. So continue to let us know as you have any difficulties with sort of applying. Make sure you take use of sort of the REBNY webinar resources to actually walk you through how to do this, because this stuff can get really tricky very quickly. And it can get very legally and accounting-wise tedious. And so you want to make sure we're giving you the playbook for you to call the right play for yourself and for your business as appropriate.
Yeah. And that said, and I'm seeing some questions in the chat. There's so many different aspects in regards to how folks are established, and to Reggie's point, we want to make sure that you take advantage of understanding the programs to make the best decisions for yourself. The information that we have on the website tries to elaborate as best as possible to provide a catchment to as many people as possible to help understand these programs. But if there is an instance to where we can't answer your question, again, just like with unemployment, we have folks who are willing to take those questions, and we'll try to get an answer to you as best we can. So, this is also something that is evolving every day. The Treasury and SBA, or some of the banks in particular, come out with different guidance on a day-by-day basis right now. These things are happening, to Reggie's point, very quickly. Fortunately, we have seen a lot of small businesses receive loans within like a matter of 3 or 4 days, depending on their circumstances. But to my point, we're really trying to provide updates as we get them. So, I would just encourage everyone to take advantage of the information that is posted on REBNY's website, and to keep checking in for updates, because there are updates posted on a daily basis sometimes, depending on the circumstances. So we'll try to keep on providing as much information as we can. I do want to continue to talk about a few more things. I don't want to take up too much more time, but there are some other aspects that I think are helpful to folks. Some tax changes that were done. And this is an example of something that was changed here over the last couple of days that we provided additional guidance on. But the IRS actually came out with guidance that will help real estate businesses maximize the intended tax benefits of the CARES Act by potentially reducing tax liabilities for 2018, 2019, and for this year as well. So real estate businesses now have the ability to go back to tax years 2018 and 2019 and immediately expense property improvements that they previously depreciated on a straight line basis over 40 years. And I think it's actually now 20 years with a QIP technical correction. I hopefully that's pretty helpful. Real estate businesses also have a higher business interest limitation, 2019, 2020, 50% of EBIT DEA. And they can also choose to operate under these higher interest limits in 2019, 2020. They make an RPTOB election when the interest limitation drops back to 30% in 2021. So in short, for many taxpayers, obviously, if we had known in 2018 what we know now, you might not have made the RPTOB election. And so hopefully this will help, rectify that for folks who might need that assistance. So taxpayers actually have until October 15th of 2021 to make the RPTOB election withdrawal statement is what they're referring to it as, which can be done by filing an amended federal tax return, again, for 2018-2019. It's Form 1065, and the amended returns must include the necessary adjustments for taxable income. So hopefully that's something that can be helpful as well for some individuals. You know, I want to talk really briefly because there's a lot of talk out there and folks are probably wondering exactly what's next, right? We get a lot of questions in regards to, well, for example, if I participate and apply for the Paycheck Protection Program and my loan doesn't go through for a while, is there actually going to be money still available to allocate to me since this is like such a popular program? And yeah, you know, I think that's not something that we necessarily need to worry about to a great extent, but it is a relevant point. And one of the things that we're hearing a lot from Congress and the federal government is in regards to next steps, a fourth stimulus. You know, this was the third stimulus bill, the CARES Act, but there's going to be a fourth stimulus bill, more than likely here in the next couple of months, to not only address some of the fixes that you know, were kind of unintended consequences of the CARES Act, but also to continue to allocate needed funds and to make additional relief available to as many people as possible. So one of the things that REBNY is very focused on right now, some of our colleagues in the real estate industry from across the country, including the Real Estate Roundtable in Washington, and a lot of our members, is to try to identify the priorities that address specifically the needs of the real estate industry on top of what it was already allocated in regards to relief, right? So what are those things? First and foremost, we see that we can make the Paycheck Protection Program even better than it already is, and more relevant to the real estate industry, to be utilized by more and more individuals to help cover costs associated with you know, what's been lost in the pandemic. So first and foremost, you know, there's a lot of aggregation and affiliation rules that basically have been established through SBA for a long period of time in regards to how you calculate how big your business is. So, you know, for a lot of real estate, obviously there's shell entities and there's affiliated businesses, et cetera. A lot of management companies, for example, that are working with landowners, all kinds of different scenarios, right? So we're trying to figure out exactly every day who can apply for certain things and who can't, relevant to the Paycheck Protection Program in particular. So we're trying to basically say that we want to waive those aggregation and affiliation rules to ensure that more and more businesses, including independent contractors, 1099 workers, are available for applying for the Paycheck Protection Program as opposed to being ineligible, which we have found some businesses are. So we're trying to do that first and foremost, which hopefully will help the real estate industry in many ways. Secondly, you know, in regards to the Paycheck Protection Program, we want to help folks obviously offset payroll expenses, but, you know, here in New York, we're hearing every day, you know, how am I going to pay rent, and what is available out there to help me pay rent if I'm a small business? Well, the Paycheck Protection Program already does that, right? You can utilize the loan to pay for rent, but in regards to forgiveness, remember that 75% of that loan has to be utilized for payroll costs, right? So that can be inhibiting in a lot of different ways. So what we're really trying to advocate for is to say that, well, you know, in the tri-state area and other more expensive markets where rent is the vast majority of an expense for a small business, you know, in those markets, they should be able to utilize you know, more of the loan amount to be put towards rent, for example, or mortgage, and to not be penalized in regards to the forgiveness aspect as a result. So we're trying to see if we can make some changes there. In regards to payroll expenses, there are some aspects of salary caps. It's not something I mentioned earlier. You know, you cannot include salary amounts over $100,000 for your loan amount. You want to make that at least $150,000 because of the reality of what people make here in New York. And then in regards to multifamily building owners, some folks might work with multifamily building owners that are seeing you know, a loss from, say, a commercial tenant not being able to utilize, not being able to pay rent, for example, and as a result, the cost of operating that building might be affected. So we're saying that multifamily building owners will be able to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program as well. So, you know, a lot of changes are needed for the Paycheck Protection Program. Secondly, in regards to other priorities for the federal stimulus, we're looking to do more for businesses that have seen an inability to file an insurance claim for business interruption, right? So obviously the cost of an insurer covering business interruption through a pandemic, you know, are astronomical. For a lot of folks, or for a lot of insurers, I have to say, you know, premiums just wouldn't been able to have been affordable if you were to have covered the aspect of what the pandemic has done for business interruption. So there's a lot of talk in Congress in regards to setting up something similar to what folks might know is the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, which was written to help offset essentially insurance costs and provide reinsurance provisions to help cover business interruption, right? So, you know, it's a heavy lift. There's no doubt about it. I think it would be a couple $100 billion a month. So it is a heavy lift, not something that's a sure thing in Congress, but something that we're advocating for because of, you know, the sheer number of businesses affected is some sort of pandemic risk insurance act that would help offset business interruption. Something that's also very important, I think, to a lot of individuals is, you know, in the current CARES Act, something that was covered was forbearance for residential mortgages, right? If you have a Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae mortgage, federally backed mortgage, you have forbearance for at least 90 days on aspects of that you might not be able to pay at this time. Obviously, you won't be able to be foreclosed upon, etc. For that 90-day period. Unfortunately, the CARES Act did not include commercial mortgages or non-federally backed mortgages. So, you know, we see that as very important in a lot of aspects, particularly to supporting small business. And we want to make sure that we're advocating for commercial mortgages to receive forbearance as well as non-federally backed mortgages of any type to be able to see that sort of relief as we're going through this crisis. Something also very important to, I think, a lot of folks is the establishment of some sort of emergency rental assistance fund. You know, obviously this wouldn't be something I think that could cover anyone, but for folks who are seeing a loss of income and have a need, you know, being able to receive assistance in regards to paying rent is very important, particularly here in New York City. So establishing some sort of rental assistance fund. We've even heard about expanding Section 8 to be utilized for, you know, both market rate rentals as well as, you know, rent subsidized, rent stabilized apartments. Expanding Section 8 to be utilized for folks who make at least, you know, 50% of the average median income here in the city to use a Section 8 voucher to offset their rent. There's a lot of different ideas out there, but establishing some sort of emergency rental assistance fund is very important, and we're advocating for that. And then finally, and we mentioned this earlier, We need to make sure that our state and local governments receive additional aid, as we're seeing great budget deficits both on the state and city level. That also includes repeal of the SALT cap. We saw that SALT was state and local tax. Those deductions were eliminated when Trump put through his tax cuts here about 2 or 3 years ago. We want to make sure that for folks who took advantage of those deductions prior to those eliminations can see that return, right? And so right now, more than ever, the repeal of the SALT cap is very important. But on top of that, we really want to hear from folks in our industry and members, whether it be from the brokerage and agent community, residential managers, et cetera, anyone in real estate, what your ideas are and what we can do to help retain relief and create additional opportunities for relief through government in particular. We're working very often with our elected officials, and we're talking to a lot of different individuals from across industries in regards to what can be done as we continue to wade through this, and also what can be done as we start to see opportunities to reopen the economy and how we can do that not only safely but effectively to make sure folks can get back to work. So we certainly want to continue to do as much as we can.
Great, thanks for that, Ryan. And just to kind of wrap up, I know many of you had questions about sort of what's been going on in Albany during this time, because obviously the state legislature still had to do work. So by law, they had to pass a budget by April 1st. And we were really happy that a number of economic development incentives that you often work with clients on were renewed for 5 years. So there were some really big ticket important items. And unfortunately, as part of sort of the Amazon rollout last year and sort of that political debacle, there was a big question about whether or not these really important incentives to encourage economic growth outside of Manhattan were going to be renewed. And they actually did get some significant extension. So for example, REAP and Lower Manhattan REAP, that's actually now been extended to 2025. ICAP is another one. It was extended from 2022 all the way through 2025. So, it's really good that we have another 5 years of these types of programs that we know work, and we know that they work. And it's just another example of how when sort of the industry rallies around something, they get things done. Many of you had called your local elected official, you went up to Albany, and so that actually had a huge impact on that. And the last thing I'll point out before we go into the Q&A is, right now, as the governor said, we kind of have plateaued. And, I want to emphasize, just because we've plateaued doesn't mean we all can go out and start, congregating in parks and playing basketball, right? No.
Yep, Reggie keeps on freezing. Yeah, so yeah, I think what he's saying is, we want to make sure that, we're doing what we can to effectively and best balance public health and public safety with making sure that we do what is needed for the economy, and that's going to be something that REBNY in particular is very focused on as we go forward.
Sorry about that. Got all the technical difficulties on such an important webinar, but yeah. With that being said, why don't we go ahead to Q&A?
Sounds good. Just one note before we jump to Q&A. One of our members shared that the New York real estate community lost a great owner and developer, Stanley Chera, and so our thoughts go out to him and his family, and it's a great loss for our industry. So just making our members aware of that. Ryan Lee, do you want to take us through some Q&A?
No problem. First of all, thank you, Reggie and Ryan. All your feedback and insights is very helpful, and we're grateful that you could spend some time with us today to discuss. And we've been receiving a lot of great questions from everyone, so sorry in advance if we don't end up getting around to it. As we mentioned, feel free to reach out afterwards, and we're happy to address whatever questions or concerns you may have. But going into some questions we actually received beforehand, so apologies if there's any overlap with what you've already covered. But one question was, in order for landlords to provide rent relief to the many businesses affected by this unprecedented crisis, what kind of regulatory policy is best suited, and or necessary to protect the economic safety net of landlords, vendors, and lenders?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, Ryan, because it's an ecosystem, right? If a tenant's not able to pay their rent, the property owner is not going to be able to pay, the banks. And then you have a sort of another fiscal crisis to some extent, right? So it's a really delicate ecosystem. As part of sort of the first package, or rather the third package, there was regulatory relief as related to residential mortgages, especially those that were sort of federally procured. And so one of the things we're looking at in the next round, and something that we're advocating with the congressional delegation and really everyone in Congress, is doing something on the commercial side, because we know that there's an increasingly call for commercial rent relief. A lot of small businesses, especially let's say hospitality, retail, were either forced to get shut down, or they're only allowed to do takeout and delivery, which you're not going to get anywhere near the revenue you were getting when you were able to make use of sort of that liquor license that you paid so much for. So, more commercial mortgage rent relief and for mortgage relief is sort of a big priority as we kind of move into the next round of advocacy.
Yeah, and just to add to that really quickly, right now what is available and really what is the best resource for folks is the Paycheck Protection Program, right? So if you're a commercial business, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, we're trying to make changes to ensure that your forgiveness is a little bit more open to where you can utilize it for rent and not be penalized for it. But you can utilize at least an aspect of that and still get forgiveness towards rent. So for small businesses right now, that's kind of the recommendation you can make. But to Reggie's point, there's a lot of advocacy and work going on to make sure that more is being done.
And then how long will it take for New York City and other large cities to recover, or is virtual remote business the new norm?
Well, what I can tell you is from talking to all of my colleagues, especially with kids at home, they cannot wait to get back to the office. So I don't think this work from home thing is going to last as long as we think it is. That's a great question. Like, what does economic recovery look like and how long it's going to take? No one has a real answer on that. And anyone who supposedly has an answer on it, I can guarantee you is likely going to be wrong in their assessment. Because, one of the things that the governor has said pretty eloquently, and I think it's something that we all agree on, is that, public health and safety and science and data has to drive that conversation. What we've seen in a lot of other countries that have experienced this is once they reopen the economy back a little too soon, you saw the number of cases spike back up again, right? And that's not what we want. That's actually one of the worst things that could possibly happen, not just from sort of an economic fabric, but just sort of a social fabric, right? I think everyone is kind of losing confidence to some extent in their ability to do business, to live their daily lives. And one of the worst things that could hurt confidence in the city and the country is for us to kind of get through this pandemic, but then to kind of relive this sort of process all over again. I can tell you from at least the real estate side, some of the things that many property owners are together talking about are, how do we manage buildings more effectively? Do we need to recycle air more? Do we need to have Purell stations and hand sanitizing stations? One of the things I'm sure government is going to have to take a look at is when we reopen the economy, do we encourage companies to maybe start off with 10 or 20% of their employees going back to work and then gradually build back up in the same way that we gradually built it down, as a way to kind of keep the public health sentiment in mind. So, to be honest, Ryan, I think that's a great question, but I don't think, I don't think there's a real answer on that. But I will say also that, with every crisis comes an opportunity, right? And you never want to let a crisis go to waste. And so this process has almost forced everybody, not just real estate, but everyone from the business side, from the nonprofit side, to almost, really think through what an economic recovery could look like. What are some of the things that we need to do big ticket wise to really get the economy moving again? Does this mean expediting construction projects? Does this mean expediting regulatory reviews of things? Does this mean preparing for pandemics potentially being the new norm? I mean, these are questions that we all should be asking and we all should be engaging on.
Appreciate that. We've also been receiving a lot of questions regarding the status of the residential rent freeze and whether you expect an extension on the 90-day no eviction policy.
Yep. And again, that's another good question. It's one of those things where we'll see kind of where we are in another 30 days in terms of where the market is and where New Yorkers are. I mean, if you see that businesses have not been able to reopen again in 90 days, you know, you can probably expect that the government is seriously going to consider extending that moratorium a bit more, because if tenants are and New Yorkers are really being hurt by lack of revenue, or let's say the next round of stimulus doesn't come through, and you see all of these protections not being able to get into the pocketbooks of everyday New Yorkers, it's going to force everyone, including government and the industry, to take a look at that eviction moratorium and make some serious decisions about whether it's in sort of the New York and New Yorkers and renters' interest to extend that a bit more, so we can make sure people stay in their homes at a time when, for everyone's public health, we want them to stay at home.
And Ryan, this one's more for you, but a few people are asking if you could speak a bit about the SBA EIDL.
Yeah, sure. No, so the EIDL is another loan available. This one's much smaller. Actually, the forgiveness isn't like it is for the Paycheck Protection Program, but it is a $10,000 loan that is available for small businesses and independent contractors that can be utilized for offsetting expenses as well. That is actually something you apply for directly through SBA. There's actually more information on the REBNY website in regards to specifics, but that is another opportunity as well. I would recommend, honestly, to look into the Paycheck Protection Program first, just because for that reason it is forgivable. The EIDL is also helpful, but the forgiveness aspect is not there. And for the Paycheck Protection Program, you know, I think for most independent contractors, you know, you're going to want to utilize to pay yourself, right? So the forgiveness will be probably a little bit more attainable. So looking into that might be more beneficial. And then honestly, in regards to receiving that funding, since the EIDL is more directly through SBA, it's probably going to take a little bit longer to not only go through the application process, but to receive that funding. Since the Paycheck Protection Program is through individual lenders, you're probably in most instances going to see money faster. So it's something to think about a little bit. But obviously, you know, every decision is dependent on what makes most sense for you and your business, and the EIDL is out there. So there is information on the REBNY website. Happy to answer additional questions offline if it need be.
All right, great. And Alex Eskel had a great question about mortgage relief. It's a bit long, so bear with me, but he mentioned how in the 2008 crisis, it was caused by residential loans not being able to be serviced. And today, many commercial loans will not be able to be serviced, especially in the retail and hospitality sector. So is there any talk of mortgage or tax relief so landlords can actually be lenient and forgiving on tenants? And you know, it seems landlords are being forced to, you know, almost be the bad guys once again because they have to. So we were hoping to get your insight on that.
Yeah, and I think that it's one of the things I think we're always worried about. I mean, just for the sake of sort of the ecosystem that I alluded to earlier. So it's one of the things that is on sort of top of our federal agenda as Congress resumes their discussions next week to have a federal plan, if you will, as it relates to mortgage forbearance on the commercial side, because to some extent it was kind of taken care of on the residential side, kind of, because, you know, there's the devil's in the details. But the mortgage item is something that we just last week even again did another round of discussions with Senator Schumer on to make sure he understood sort of the overarching need there. One of the things we also are taking a look at and we've proposed is, you know, what are some things that city and state governments can do? Because oftentimes we try to put all of our eggs in the egg basket of the federal government and they don't deliver the way we need them to. So we have to take a look at what local levers we can push. So one of the ideas that we put out there is a property tax abatement for property owners who either forgive or offer dramatic concessions on rent that was supposed to come in during the time of this crisis. And we think that is a way that ensures that government, the tenant, and the property owner itself all have skin in the game. But the one thing I do want to caution is we have a very bleak outlook as it relates to revenue. on a city and state level. Right now, city and state governments are working overtime to weather this crisis, and every single dollar counts. And so it's one of those trade-offs that policymakers are going to have to undertake in the next few weeks and months.
And then I think we're running a bit short on time, but maybe for the last question from Martin, given the onslaught of regressive legislation over the last year directed at the New York City real estate industry, and knowing the level of contribution that commercial and residential property makes to New York City's budget, do you see any relaxation in or reversals of these laws?
What regressive legislation? I don't know what you're talking about. So it was interesting in the pre-pandemic. One of the things we had found in our day-to-day advocacy, and this is one of the changes REBNY had made, especially with bringing on sort of caliber of talent, like for example Ryan, where we needed to do more day-to-day engagement with elected officials. I mean, long gone are the days where you can just call a governor or a speaker of a house and get things done. We really needed to expand the bench a bit more. And to that end, I mean, we have 4 or 5 new staffers in government affairs who, were having day-to-day conversations with elected officials, and they started to understand and really see sort of the ramifications, if you will, of some of the laws they have passed. So as an example, when they're getting a call from a constituent saying my landlord isn't doing, a capital improvement or an upgrade, well, it's because you cap these types of things at only $10,000, right? And so we were actually building a lot of momentum on that, but of course things like the pandemic happened. So it's one of those things where we're going to obviously continue to advocate for the industry. We're going to again push back and to make sure that we educate elected officials on the ramifications of some of the laws that they had previously passed. But we also see the Rent Guidelines Board is sort of another big issue where, for those of you who have clients really on the residential side and the residential housing market who have rent regulated buildings, there was a big concern with the Rent Guidelines Board only increasing rents 1 or 2 or 3% a year, even though costs have gone up over 5%. At some point the dam is going to fall if property owners aren't able to recoup costs of even just being able to make basic maintenance and capital repairs to a property. So it's something that, for better or for worse, elected officials right now are focused on public safety, but we are forcing them as much as we can for them to understand some of the ramifications of both the rent laws that were passed last June and how it works and how it sort of dovetails into the crisis that we're having now as it relates to a lack of revenue coming in to help support these public safety measures.
Thank you for that. And again, we have received a lot of other questions, so apologies if we didn't get around to it. Feel free to email me or Laura following this if you'd like to continue this discussion and get in any other inquiries. But thank you again, Reggie and Ryan. We really appreciate you taking the time, and I'll kick it back to Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Reggie and Ryan. I know you guys are working day and night and advocating for New York and real estate, and we really appreciate your time here and your preparedness and sharing with our members. So thanks again. Thanks to Ryan Lee and to the board for putting this together. Stay tuned for future events. We have a few things planned, and look out for emails, check the website, and take care of each other out there. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.